The Haunting of the Forgotten Church, a Paranormal Nightmare. If you like the story, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. Also, it would be fun if you let me know what time it is when you watch it. Let's begin. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in the room, casting long shadows across the cluttered desk. It was past midnight, the kind of hour where curiosity often becomes recklessness. I wasn't a stranger to the deep web. Its murky, unfiltered corners had always fascinated me. The anonymity, the forbidden knowledge, the sense of stepping beyond the boundaries of the known world. It was irresistible. That night, I was scrolling through a forum I hadn't visited before. Its name was cryptic, something like Veil of the Abyss, and its threads were full of strange tales and conspiracy theories. Most of it was nonsense. Ghost stories, urban legends, wild claims about shadowy organizations. But then I saw it, a thread titled The Forgotten Church. Do not go. The post had hundreds of replies, some urging caution, others mocking the idea. The original poster claimed they had stumbled upon an ancient, abandoned church deep in the woods, coordinates shared only through whispers in the dark web. They described it as a place where time and space didn't work the way they should, where the air itself felt alive, and where an unseen presence watched every move. Their warnings were explicit. No matter how curious you are, don't go. People don't come back the same. My fingers hovered over the mouse, debating whether to click on the link they provided. Curiosity gnawed at me, outweighing the warning signs. I clicked. The page that loaded was stark, a simple black background with a single paragraph of text. The Forgotten Church. Coordinates below. Enter at your own risk. Once you see it, you'll never unsee it. Beneath the text were a set of GPS coordinates, glowing faintly as though they carried some hidden power. I hesitated, my pulse quickening. This was different from the usual deep web mysteries. The thread was old, the responses stretching back years, but people were still talking about it, still sharing their fragmented experiences. The comments were cryptic. It knows you're looking. The church is a doorway, not a place. You'll never leave it behind. Most chilling of all was a single comment from an anonymous user. The church doesn't find everyone. If you're here, it's already decided. I sat back, staring at the screen, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. It was just another ghost story, another thread designed to spook gullible explorers. But something about it felt different. The way the comments were written, the sheer weight of the warnings, it was enough to make me pause. I copied the coordinates into another tab, pulling up a map of the area. The location was deep in the woods, miles from any town or road. There was no indication of a structure there, just endless trees and a few scattered trails. Why would anyone go there? I muttered to myself, though the question was rhetorical. I already knew the answer. The post lingered in my mind long after I closed the browser. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about the eerie descriptions and the warnings that felt too genuine to ignore. Sleep was out of the question. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those coordinates glowing faintly against the black screen. By sunrise, I had made up my mind. I told myself it was just another deep web myth, a story to scare the curious and the naive. But I had to see for myself. If nothing else, I wanted proof that it was nothing more than an abandoned building in the woods. I packed my bag with a flashlight, a notebook, and a few other essentials, ignoring the nagging sense of unease that had settled in my chest. By the time I started my car, the coordinates were already programmed into the GPS. As I drove toward the location, the world outside grew quieter, the road narrowing until it became little more than a dirt path. The forest thickened around me, the trees casting long, spindly shadows that seemed to reach for the car. My GPS alerted me when I was close, its robotic voice cutting through the silence. You have arrived at your destination. I parked at the edge of a clearing, the coordinates leading me to an overgrown trailhead. The air was unnaturally still, the forest silent except for the faint rustle of leaves in a breeze. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest. I double-checked the coordinates on my phone, ensuring I was in the right place. The trail ahead was faint, barely visible through the dense undergrowth, but it was there. My flashlight cut through the early morning gloom as I stepped onto the path, each step feeling heavier than the last. I didn't know what I expected to find, but the air itself seemed to change the further I walked. It was colder here, denser, carrying a faint metallic tang that stung my nostrils. The deeper I went, the more it felt like I was being watched. And then, in the distance, I saw it. The faint outline of a building appeared through the trees, its shape jagged and unnatural against the morning light. The forgotten church. It looked like something that didn't belong, like it had been dropped into the forest by mistake. A chill ran down my spine as I stepped closer, the whispers of the deep web thread echoing in my mind. Once you see it, you'll never unsee it. The trail leading to the church was uneven and overgrown, as though nature itself was trying to hide its existence. My flashlight barely pierced the gloom, the beam illuminating gnarled roots and patches of moss that covered the path. The further I walked, the quieter the forest became. No birds, no insects, just the faint crunch of my boots on the ground and my own labored breathing. The air grew colder with every step, the metallic tang intensifying until it was all I could smell. It clung to the back of my throat, sharp and unnatural, making me wonder if it was a warning to turn back. But I didn't. I couldn't. The outline of the church grew sharper through the trees, its dark silhouette looming like a jagged scar against the landscape. The closer I got, the stranger the forest became. The trees seemed to twist unnaturally, their branches forming shapes that resembled letters or symbols, though none I could recognize. The bark was covered in carvings, intricate patterns that glowed faintly in the beam of my flashlight. They looked ancient, their edges worn and weathered, but there was something deliberate about them, as though they weren't just random marks but messages left behind. I stopped to examine one of the symbols, running my fingers over its rough surface. It pulsed faintly under my touch, as though the tree itself was alive and reacting to me. A shiver ran through me, and I quickly pulled my hand away. As I continued, the path began to shift. It wasn't just the uneven terrain. It felt like the ground was subtly moving beneath my feet, pulling me forward. The forest around me grew denser, the trees pressing in closer, their branches tangling overhead to form an almost tunnel-like canopy. The light from my flashlight seemed weaker now, struggling to push back the darkness. The metallic scent was stronger here, almost suffocating. It mixed with something else, something sweet and cloying, like rotting flowers. My stomach turned, but I kept moving. The church was just ahead, its jagged edges cutting through the gloom like broken glass. When I finally stepped into the clearing, the air seemed to change entirely. It was still and heavy, pressing against my skin like a weight. The church stood in the center, its crooked steeple reaching skyward as though clawing at the heavens. The structure was old, far older than it should have been, its stones blackened with age and overrun with moss and vines. The windows were shattered, jagged shards of glass clinging to their frames like teeth. The door hung slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Despite its decrepit state, the building radiated an undeniable power. It felt alive, watching, waiting. The carvings I had seen on the trees continued here, etched into the stones of the church itself. They glowed faintly, pulsing in a slow, rhythmic pattern that made my skin crawl. It was as though the building was breathing, its walls rising and falling in time with the glow. I stepped closer, the sound of my boots on the ground unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. The whispers from the deep web thread echoed in my mind. Once you see it, you'll never unsee it. I reached the base of the church steps and stopped. The door was wide enough for me to see inside, but the darkness beyond was impenetrable, a void that seemed to swallow the faint light from my flashlight. My pulse quickened as I stood there, debating whether to enter. The forest behind me felt just as menacing as the church ahead, the twisted trees and faintly glowing symbols a reminder that there was no safety here. Taking a deep breath, I climbed the steps, each one creaking loudly under my weight. The closer I got to the door, the heavier the air became, thick and oppressive like I was walking through water. When I finally reached the threshold, I hesitated. My flashlight barely illuminated the space beyond, revealing cracked stone floors and broken pews shrouded in shadows. The carvings on the walls pulsed faintly, their glow casting eerie patterns across the interior. I stepped inside, the air growing colder with every step. The door creaked shut behind me, the sound echoing through the empty space. My flashlight flickered briefly, its beams struggling against the suffocating darkness. The interior was even more decrepit than the exterior, the walls crumbling and the ceiling sagging dangerously. The pews were broken and scattered, their splintered wood covered in a fine layer of dust that seemed undisturbed. At the far end of the room, where an altar should have been, stood a large stone pedestal, its surface covered in glowing carvings. The whispers began then, soft and indistinct, like the rustling of leaves. At first, I thought it was the wind, but there was no wind here. The sound came from within the church, from the shadows that seemed to writhe and shift just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I turned slowly, my flashlight sweeping across the room. The carvings on the walls glowed brighter as I moved, their light pulsating in time with the whispers. I felt watched, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against me. The whispers grew louder, their tone rising and falling like a chant. I couldn't make out the words, but there was an undeniable malice in their cadence. My hand shook as I gripped the flashlight tighter, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that the eerie atmosphere and my own fear were playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't alone. The whispers seemed to coalesce, their voices blending into a single chilling phrase. "You've been expected." My blood ran cold as the words echoed through the church, reverberating off the walls. The light from my flashlight flickered again, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something move in the shadows, something large and unnatural. The door was just behind me, but the pedestal at the far end of the room seemed to pull at me, its glow brighter now, almost inviting. I had come this far. There was no turning back. I stood frozen in the doorway, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The whispers swirled around me, their disjointed voices weaving an oppressive melody that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. The pedestal at the far end of the room pulsed with light, its carvings glowing in rhythm with the whispers, like some dark heartbeat that commanded the church's lifeless structure. As I stepped further inside, the floor creaked under my weight, the sound swallowed by the vast emptiness of the space. My light flickered weakly against the walls, revealing fragments of stained glass clinging to their frames, casting distorted patterns of color onto the stone. Each shard seemed to tell a story, but none of them made sense. Chaotic scenes of figures engulfed in darkness, their faces twisted in agony or ecstasy. The air grew heavier with every step, pressing down on my chest like an invisible weight. The carvings on the walls were more intricate than those outside, their glowing lines forming patterns that seemed to shift and move if I stared too long. They weren't random, they were deliberate, purposeful, as though each one told a story or carried a warning I couldn't decipher. My flashlight beam caught something glinting in the corner of the room. I turned, revealing an old, rotting lectern covered in dust and cobwebs. On it rested a thick, leather-bound book, its cover cracked and worn with age. The whispers quieted as I approached, their silence more unsettling than their noise. I reached out with a trembling hand, brushing away the dust to reveal the book's title, embossed in faded gold letters, The Writings of the Unseen. My stomach churned as I opened it, the pages brittle and yellowed with time. The text was handwritten in a language I didn't recognize, jagged symbols and looping patterns that mirrored the carvings on the walls. Scattered among the text were crude sketches, their details horrifying. They depicted the church in its prime, filled with robed figures performing what looked like rituals. One image showed a pedestal identical to the one at the end of the room, with something unidentifiable resting on top. Another showed the same robed figures surrounding a large, shadowy shape, their hands raised in what looked like supplication or surrender. The whispers returned, louder now, their tone sharper, almost accusing. The carvings on the walls pulsed brighter, the light casting eerie shadows that seemed to crawl along the floor. My flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment, the room was plunged into darkness. When the beam returned, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The shadows had moved. They weren't static anymore. They twisted and stretched unnaturally, pooling together in corners and creeping along the walls. I stepped back instinctively, my breath catching in my throat. The whispers grew louder, their fragmented words forming a single chilling phrase. The heart must awaken. I turned toward the pedestal at the far end of the room. It glowed brighter now, the symbols on its surface shifting and swirling like liquid light. I felt drawn to it, as though some unseen force was pulling me forward. The room seemed to close in around me as I approached the pedestal. The air grew colder, and the metallic tang I had smelled earlier returned, sharper and more nauseating. The whispers became a deafening chant, their words overlapping in a chaotic frenzy. It waits. It sees. It awakens. When I reached the pedestal, I hesitated. Its surface was covered in the same intricate carvings as the walls, glowing with an intensity that hurt to look at. In the center was a shallow indentation, as though it were waiting for something to be placed inside. I felt a strange pressure in my pocket and instinctively reached inside. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, and I pulled it out, a small ornate key I didn't remember picking up. Its surface was covered in tiny carvings that matched the symbols on the pedestal. The whispers fell silent as I held the key, the sudden quiet almost deafening. I looked at the pedestal, then at the key, my mind racing with questions. Was this what the church wanted? Had I brought this key here, or had it found its way to me? Against every instinct, I placed the key into the indentation. The moment it touched the surface, the pedestal flared with light, blinding and all-consuming. The ground beneath me trembled, and a low, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through my body. The carvings on the walls glowed in response, their light flowing toward the pedestal like rivers of liquid fire. The shadows in the room coalesced, forming tall humanoid shapes that stood silently, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The hum grew louder, the air around me vibrating with its intensity. I stumbled back, my heart racing as the shadows began to move, their forms shifting and twisting unnaturally. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent. It is awake. The heart beats again. You are part of it now. The light from the pedestal dimmed slightly, revealing something new. In its center was a small object, a black pulsating orb that seemed to absorb the light around it. It wasn't just a relic. It was alive. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. The orb pulsed in rhythm with a hum, its surface shifting and rippling like liquid. The whispers filled my mind, no longer external but internal, their voices blending with my thoughts. The shadows closed in, their forms towering over me. The air grew heavier, the weight of their presence pressing me to my knees. My flashlight flickered one final time before going dark, leaving me alone in the pulsating glow of the orb. And then the voice spoke. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't many voices. It was one, deep, resonant, and impossibly old. You've awakened it. Now you belong to it. The voice echoed in my mind, louder than the whispers but with a chilling calmness that rooted me to the spot. The shadows around me pulsed and shifted, their forms growing taller, more distinct. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly, the light reflecting off the pulsating orb that now sat at the center of the pedestal. I wanted to run, to escape the oppressive weight of the church and its unnatural inhabitants, but my legs wouldn't move. The air was too heavy, pressing down on me like a physical force. The voice returned, resonating deep in my chest. You are part of it now. There is no turning back. The orb's light grew brighter, casting eerie, flickering shadows across the crumbling walls. The carvings seemed to writhe in response, their patterns shifting into something that resembled writing, a language I couldn't understand but somehow felt was meant for me. The shadows began to whisper, their disjointed voices overlapping into a chaotic symphony. At first, it was unintelligible, but as I strained to listen, the words began to take form. You brought it back. The heart beats because of you. The veil is lifted. I clutched my head, trying to block out the voices, but they weren't coming from outside. They were inside me, invading my thoughts like a parasite. The air in the church grew colder, the metallic tang in the air sharpening until it was almost unbearable. The shadows moved closer, their forms flickering like distorted images on a broken screen. One of them stepped forward, its hollow eyes locking onto mine. You're not real, I whispered, my voice shaking. This isn't real. The shadow tilted its head, its form rippling as though amused by my words. The voice returned, calm and unwavering. This is as real as you are. The orb on the pedestal pulsed in rhythm with the voice, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. The glow spread outward, flowing across the floor and climbing the walls like living veins of energy. I backed away instinctively, my heart pounding in my chest. My flashlight was useless now, its beam swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The only light came from the orb and the veins of energy it was spreading, illuminating the church in a ghostly glow. The shadows followed my retreat, their forms gliding silently across the floor. The voice spoke again, this time with a note of authority. You cannot leave. The heart has awakened, and you are bound to it. What do you want from me? I shouted, my voice cracking. The shadows stopped, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The voice replied, its tone almost pitying. To see, to know, to be. The orb flared brighter, its light flooding the room and forcing me to shield my eyes. When the glow dimmed, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The shadows were no longer just vague forms. They were becoming human. Their shapes solidified, taking on features that were disturbingly familiar. Each one resembled a person I had seen in my life. Old friends, strangers on the street, even family members long gone. Their faces were blank, their eyes glowing faintly, but there was no mistaking who they were. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent. It remembers you. It is you. You are part of the heart. I stumbled back, my mind racing. None of this made sense. How could these shadows know me? How could they take on forms from my life? The orb pulsed again, and the figures began to speak, their voices layered and discordant. Do you see now? The heart is all. The heart is you. I shook my head, refusing to believe what I was hearing. This isn't real, I said again, though the words felt hollow. The shadow that had stepped forward tilted its head once more, its face twisting into a grotesque parody of a smile. The voice returned, louder and more commanding. Deny it if you wish, but the truth remains. The heart beats for you, and you for it. The veins of light spreading across the walls began to pulse faster, their glow casting the shadows into sharp relief. The carvings shifted again, their patterns forming a spiral that seemed to draw my gaze no matter how hard I tried to look away. The shadows moved closer, surrounding me in a circle. The air was thick with the hum of the orb and the whispers of the shadows, their voices blending into a single deafening chant. The heart awakens. The veil is lifted. The truth is revealed. I clutched my head, my thoughts spiraling as the chant grew louder. The orb pulsed in time with the chant, its light growing blindingly bright. And then everything stopped. The light dimmed, the whispers faded, and the shadows froze in place. The air was still, but the oppressive weight remained, pressing down on me like a physical force. The voice returned, softer now, almost a whisper itself. You have seen. You have awakened it. Now you must choose. Choose what? I asked, my voice barely audible. The orb pulsed faintly, its surface rippling like water. The voice replied, to embrace the heart or to leave it behind. But know this, the heart never forgets. I stare at the orb, its glow casting faint patterns across the floor. The shadows watched silently, their hollow eyes unblinking. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more horrifying than the last. The voice spoke one final time. Choose wisely, for the heart's gift is eternal. The room fell silent, the decision mine to make. The silence in the church was deafening, the oppressive weight of the unseen pressing against my chest. The orb's faint glow was the only source of light, casting eerie, shifting patterns onto the cracked stone walls. The shadows remained still, their hollow eyes fixed on me, their forms blending into the pulsing veins of energy that stretched from the pedestal. And then the orb pulsed violently, sending a shockwave through the room. The carvings on the walls flared to life, their light blinding. The air grew thick with static electricity, and the oppressive silence was shattered by a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the very foundation of the church. The shadows began to move again, their forms twisting and contorting unnaturally. Their hollow eyes glowed brighter, and their movements became more deliberate, as if they were preparing for something. The whispers returned, their chaotic murmurings forming fragmented phrases. The heart awakens. The vessel comes forth. It sees you now. I stumbled back, my heart racing, as the orb rose slowly from the pedestal, hovering in midair. The pulsing light intensified, each flash revealing the shifting forms of the shadows as they coalesced into something larger. The air was heavy with an overwhelming presence, and I could feel it watching me, its gaze piercing through every fiber of my being. The shadows began to merge, their forms blending together into a single, towering mass. The figure that emerged was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was humanoid in shape, but impossibly tall, its limbs elongated and unnaturally thin. Its surface was composed of swirling shadows, constantly shifting and rippling as though it were made of liquid darkness. Its head tilted unnaturally, and its hollow eyes burned with a piercing, otherworldly light. When it spoke, its voice wasn't a whisper. It was a deep, resonant tone that filled the room and echoed in my mind. You have awakened me. The words hit me like a physical blow, reverberating through my chest. My knees buckled, and I fell to the ground, my flashlight clattering uselessly beside me. The entity stepped closer, its movements smooth and fluid, as though it were gliding rather than walking. The orb hovered beside it, pulsing faintly in rhythm with the voice. The carvings on the walls shifted again, forming intricate patterns that seemed to move and change with every second. The entity reached out with one elongated hand, its shadowy fingers stretching toward me. Do you understand what you have done? It asked, its tone devoid of emotion yet filled with an undeniable weight. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean to. I didn't know. The entity's form rippled, and its hollow eyes burned brighter. Ignorance is no excuse, it replied. You sought the truth, and now you are bound to it. I scrambled back, my hands scraping against the rough stone floor. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice trembling. The entity tilted its head again, its movements unnervingly slow. The heart does not want. The heart is. It connects all things, sees all things, becomes all things. And now you are part of it. The whispers grew louder, forming a chorus around me. One with the heart, one with the truth, one with the beyond. I clutched my head, trying to block out the voices, but they were inside me now, inescapable. The entity stepped closer, its towering form casting long, shifting shadows across the room. The heart has chosen you as its vessel, it said. You will carry it, and through you, it will spread. No, I shouted, my voice breaking. I didn't ask for this. I don't want this. The entity paused, its glowing eyes narrowing slightly. It is not a matter of want. It is a matter of being. The heart does not forget, and neither will you. The orb pulsed violently, its light flooding the room. The carvings on the walls flared brighter than ever, their patterns spinning and shifting into something incomprehensible. The whispers became a deafening roar, their fragmented words overlapping into a chaotic symphony. The entity raised both hands, and the orb began to descend, its glow dimming as it moved toward me. I tried to move, to run, but my body refused to obey. The air was thick and heavy, pressing down on me like an invisible force. Accept the heart, the entity commanded, its voice shaking the very walls of the church. Become one with it, or be consumed by it. The orb stopped inches from my chest, its light pulsating faintly. I could feel its energy radiating outward, seeping into my skin, my mind, my very soul. The whispers softened, their tone almost pleading now. Let it in. The truth is yours. The heart beats for you. Tears streamed down my face as I struggled against the invisible force holding me in place. Please, I begged, my voice cracking. I just want to leave. I didn't mean to. The entity loomed over me, its form rippling with shadows. There is no leaving, it said. The heart is eternal. It is everywhere. And now it is you. The orb pressed against my chest, and a surge of energy flooded through me, overwhelming and all-consuming. My vision blurred, the room dissolving into a swirl of light and darkness. The whispers became a single, unified voice, echoing in my mind. You are the vessel. You are the bridge. You are the heart. And then everything went still. When I came to, I was lying on the cold stone floor of the church, the pulsating glow from the orb now dimmed to a faint, steady light. The entity was gone, its towering shadow no longer looming over me. The air felt lighter, less oppressive, but I wasn't alone. The whispers lingered, faint and distant, like echoes in the back of my mind. I sat up, my head spinning as I tried to process what had happened. My flashlight lay beside me, its beam barely cutting through the darkness. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a faint vibration that sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I pulled it out, expecting to see a message or notification, but the screen was glitching, flickering with static and faint images that I couldn't make out. The whispers grew louder as I stared at the screen, their fragmented words forming a chilling phrase. It sees you. The phone screen stabilized, revealing an app one didn't recognize, a black window with a single blinking cursor. Beneath it were the words, "Enter your query." My hands trembled as I held the phone, the whispers urging me to type something. Against my better judgment, I typed, "What is the heart?" The response appeared instantly, as though the app had been waiting for the question. The heart is the bridge. The heart is the truth. The heart is eternal. The words sent a chill down my spine. I typed again, my breath shallow and uneven. Why me? This time the response took longer to appear. The screen flickered, the text glitching briefly before stabilizing. Because you sought it. Because you awakened it. Because you are it. The whispers grew louder, their tone almost mocking. You cannot deny it. You are chosen. You are the vessel. I dropped the phone, my heart racing as the whispers echoed in my mind. The church seemed to close in around me, the carvings on the walls glowing faintly in rhythm with the whispers. I reached for the phone again, desperate for answers. The screen showed a new message, one I hadn't typed. The truth cannot be escaped. I stared at the words, my thoughts a chaotic swirl of fear and confusion. The phone buzzed again, and another message appeared. Look behind you. My blood ran cold. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as the whispers grew deafening, their fragmented words forming a single command. Turn around. Slowly I turned, the light from my flashlight flickering weakly as it illuminated the room. At first, I saw nothing but the crumbling walls and the faintly glowing carvings. But then, in the shadows near the pedestal, something moved. The entity was back. It was smaller now, its towering form reduced to a shadowy figure that hovered near the pedestal. Its hollow eyes burned with the same piercing light, and its presence was just as suffocating as before. The whispers fell silent, replaced by the deep, resonant voice that had spoken earlier. You cannot run. You cannot hide. The heart is everywhere. The orb began to glow brighter, its light pulsing in time with the entity's voice. My phone buzzed again, and another message appeared. You brought it into the world. Now it will spread. What does that mean? I shouted, my voice shaking. What do you want from me? The entity tilted its head, its form rippling like smoke. The voice replied, calm and unwavering. The heart is not bound by the church. It is not bound by you. It is infinite. The carvings on the walls shifted again, their patterns forming symbols that I now recognized as part of the deep web thread I had found. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The church wasn't just a place. It was connected to something far greater, something that extended beyond the physical world. The phone buzzed again, and a new message appeared. It spreads through the veil, through the wires, through you. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. The deep web forum, the cryptic messages, the coordinates. It had all been part of the heart's reach, drawing me in, pulling me closer. The whispers returned, their voices sharp and insistent. It will consume. It will connect. It will become. The entity stepped closer, its glowing eyes fixed on me. You have already spread it. Through the thread. Through your connection. Through your thoughts. No, I whispered, shaking my head. That's not possible. The voice replied, cold and final. It is already done. The orb flared one last time, its light filling the room and blinding me. When it faded, the entity was gone, and the church was silent. The carvings on the walls had stopped glowing, their intricate patterns now lifeless and still. I looked at my phone, hoping for some sign that this was over, but the screen showed one final message. You are the bridge. You are the heart. It begins with you. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened screen, but it wasn't my face. It was something else, something shadowy with hollow, glowing eyes. The silence in the church was unbearable, thick with an unnatural stillness that felt alive. The orb's glow had dimmed to a faint pulse, its light barely illuminating the space. My phone lay in my trembling hand, the last message still burning in my mind. You are the bridge. You are the heart. It begins with you. I stare at the pedestal, my breath shallow and uneven. The carvings on the walls, once alive with shifting patterns, were now dormant, their light extinguished. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then the air grew heavy again, and the whispers returned, faint and insistent. The shadows in the room began to move, their forms coalescing once more into the towering entity I had thought was gone. Its hollow eyes burned brighter than before, and its voice resonated deep in my chest. The heart has chosen you, Alex. But there is still a choice to make. My throat tightened as I forced myself to speak. What choice? The entity tilted its head, its form rippling like smoke. To accept the truth and become part of the heart, or to deny it and face what lies beyond. The orb on the pedestal pulsed faintly, its rhythm matching the beating of my heart. The whispers grew louder, their voices overlapping into a chaotic symphony. Embrace it. The heart beats for you. The bridge must remain. I took a step back, my hands trembling. I don't understand, I said, my voice cracking. What does it mean to become part of the heart? The entity moved closer, its towering form casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. You will be the vessel through which the heart spreads. Its truth will flow through you, connecting all things. You will see what cannot be unseen, know what cannot be unknown. The weight of its words pressed down on me, suffocating and inescapable. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. The entity's eyes flared, their glow casting sharp, jagged patterns across the room. If you refuse, the heart will consume you. Your essence will be scattered, and you will exist only as a fragment within its infinite reach. The whispers shifted, their tone almost pleading now. You cannot run. The heart is eternal. You are chosen. I felt the ground beneath me tremble, the air growing colder as the entity raised one elongated hand, pointing toward the orb. Make your choice, Alex. Become the heart, or be lost to it. Tears blur my vision as I stare at the orb, its pulsating light mesmerizing and terrifying. The weight of the decision was unbearable, each option a nightmare in its own right. The whispers grew louder, filling my head with their insistent chant. The bridge must remain. The truth must spread. The heart beats forever. I took another step back, my legs shaking. I didn't ask for this, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I just wanted to know the truth. The entity's hollow eyes seemed to narrow, its tone softening. The truth is never without cost. You sought it, and now you must bear it. The orb flared brighter, its light flooding the room. Images flashed through my mind, visions of places I had never seen, people I had never met, and worlds that defied explanation. I saw the heart spreading, its veins of light stretching across the fabric of reality, binding everything together. The whispers returned, softer now, almost soothing. You are the beginning. You are the connection. You are the heart. The images faded, and I found myself kneeling before the pedestal, the orb's glow bathing me in its light. The entity loomed over me, its voice resonating with finality. Choose, Alex. The heart waits for no one. I hesitated, my mind racing. The thought of surrendering to the heart, of becoming its vessel, was horrifying. But the alternative, being consumed, lost to its infinite reach, was no better. My hands clenched into fists as I forced myself to speak. What happens if I accept? The entity's form rippled, its hollow eyes burning brighter. You will transcend. You will see the truth of all things and become one with the heart. It is not death. It is not life. It is existence beyond either. The orb pulsed again, its light growing warmer, almost inviting. The whispers softened, their tone pleading. Let it in. The heart will guide you. You are the bridge. I stared at the orb, my thoughts spiraling. The church, the deep web, the warnings, they had all led me here. This was the truth I had sought, the knowledge I had craved. But now that it was in front of me, I wasn't sure I wanted it. The entity stepped closer, its towering form casting a shadow over the pedestal. The heart has chosen. Now you must choose. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath as the orb's warmth seeped into my skin. The whispers faded into silence, leaving me alone with the weight of my decision. When I opened my eyes, the entity was watching, waiting. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched the orb. Its light surged, blinding and all-consuming. The whispers returned, louder than ever, their voices blending into a single unified chant. The heart beats. The bridge remains. The truth is eternal. And as the light engulfed me, I made my choice. The moment my hand touched the orb, a surge of energy coursed through me, overwhelming and all-consuming. My vision blurred, the room around me dissolving into a swirling void of light and shadow. The whispers were deafening now, their voices no longer disjointed but unified, a single chant that reverberated in my mind. The heart beats. The bridge must remain. The energy from the orb felt alive, pushing into me, pulling at me, as though it was trying to weave itself into the very fabric of my being. But something deep inside me resisted, a primal instinct, a desperate need to survive. My hands pulled back, breaking contact with the orb, and I stumbled away from the pedestal. The whispers faltered, their rhythm breaking, replaced by an eerie silence. The entity loomed before me, its shadowy form rippling like liquid smoke. Its hollow eyes flared with anger, their piercing glow cutting through the dim light of the church. You cannot deny the heart, it said, its voice sharp and resonant. You are bound to it. You are the bridge. I didn't ask for this. I shouted, my voice cracking. I don't want to be part of this. The entity's form seemed to grow larger, its edges stretching unnaturally as it advanced toward me. The heart does not ask. The heart takes. The heart consumes. I scrambled backward, my heart pounding as I searched for a way out. The door to the church was still closed, its edges faintly glowing with the same carvings that adorned the walls. The air grew heavier, pressing down on me like a physical weight. The orb pulsed violently, its light flickering as though reacting to my defiance. The carvings on the walls flared back to life, their patterns shifting into spirals that seemed to follow me wherever I moved. The whispers returned, louder and more frenzied. The bridge cannot break. The heart must beat. You are the bridge. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the stone floor as I headed for the door. The entity's voice boomed behind me, its tone dripping with malice. You cannot escape. The heart is everywhere. The shadows along the walls twisted and writhed, reaching out like grasping hands. The air felt alive, every inch of it pressing against me, slowing my movements as though I were running through water. The whispers became screams, their overlapping voices forming a cacophony that echoed through the church. The heart consumes all. You cannot run. You cannot hide. I reached the door and grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The carvings glowed brighter, their patterns shifting and writhing under my touch. I banged against the door, desperation clawing at my chest. Let me out. I screamed, my voice raw. The entity appeared behind me, its form towering and oppressive. There is no escape, it said, its voice resonating with finality. You are part of the heart now. Accept it. The orb's light grew blinding, its pulses quickening as the energy in the room reached a fever pitch. I turned to face the entity, my back pressed against the door. My chest heaved as I struggled to catch my breath, my mind racing for a way to break free. My gaze fell on the carvings that adorned the walls, their spirals and patterns glowing with an otherworldly light. And then I remembered the symbols. They weren't just carvings. They were part of the heart, part of its control over this place. If the heart was tied to these symbols, then maybe I could sever that connection. Gripping my flashlight tightly, I stepped toward the nearest wall, the light flickering in the dense, oppressive air. The entity moved closer, its voice sharp and commanding. You cannot destroy the heart. It is eternal. It is infinite. I ignored its words, focusing on the glowing carvings. With a deep breath, I swung the flashlight against the wall, shattering a section of the glowing patterns. The room shook violently, the light from the orb flickering erratically. The whispers faltered, their unified chant breaking into fragmented voices. The entity let out a deafening roar, its form rippling and distorting as though it were struggling to maintain its shape. You will regret this, it said, its voice trembling with rage. I didn't stop. I moved to the next section of the wall and struck again, the carvings shattering under the force. The room trembled, cracks forming along the floor as the orb's light dimmed further. The whispers grew fainter, their chaotic noise replaced by a low, mournful hum. The entity staggered, its form shrinking as its hollow eyes burned dimmer. You are breaking the connection, it said, its tone now tinged with desperation. You are severing the bridge. That's the idea, I muttered, swinging the flashlight one last time. The final section of carving shattered, and the room was plunged into darkness. The orb let out a final blinding flash of light before disappearing entirely. The hum faded, and the oppressive weight in the air lifted. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. The entity was gone, its presence erased along with the heart's glow. The whispers were silent, their voices no longer clawing at the edges of my mind. I stood shakily, my legs weak beneath me, and turned toward the door. The carvings that had once glowed so brightly were now lifeless, their patterns faded into the crumbling stone. I pushed the door open, stepping out into the cold night air. The forest was silent, its oppressive energy gone. The stars above shone brightly, their light untouched by the horrors I had witnessed. I stumbled back toward the trail, the weight of the church finally lifting from my shoulders. As I reached my car, I glanced back at the forest, half expecting the entity to emerge, but there was nothing. Just the trees, silent and still. I drove away, the road stretching endlessly ahead of me, the whispers now nothing more than a faint memory. But deep down, I knew the truth. The heart was gone for now. But it wasn't destroyed. It never would be. The drive away from the church felt surreal. the oppressive weight of its presence still lingering in my chest. The forest seemed quieter now, almost as if it were holding its breath. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I replayed the events in my mind. The orb, the carvings, the entity, it wasn't over. I had escaped, but the whispers still echoed faintly at the edge of my thoughts, a reminder that the heart was not truly gone. The road stretched endlessly before me, the headlights cutting through the darkness. My phone buzzed again, vibrating on the passenger seat. I glanced at it cautiously, expecting to see another cryptic message or glitching screen. Instead, it displayed a single ominous notification. You severed the bridge. The heart remembers. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt on the deserted road. My chest tightened as I picked up the phone, staring at the message. It wasn't from any app or contact I recognized. The sender was listed as unknown, and the text glitched faintly, like it was struggling to exist. What does that mean? I whispered to myself, my voice shaking. The phone buzzed again, displaying another message. The heart cannot be destroyed. Its curse binds you. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I threw the phone onto the seat, my mind racing. The church might have been left behind, but the heart's influence wasn't contained to that place. It was connected to me now, like a shadow I couldn't outrun. As I continued driving, I noticed subtle changes in my surroundings. The trees along the road seemed to bend unnaturally, their branches twisting into faintly familiar shapes. The carvings. I could see faint patterns in the bark, glowing faintly in the corner of my vision. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles white. The forest wasn't just watching me, it was following me. The hum I thought I had left behind began to vibrate faintly in the air, growing louder with every mile. I had to stop it. I had to sever the curse completely, or it would never let me go. The thought led me to a single, chilling realization. The church held the answer. Whatever the heart was, whatever power it wielded, its source was there, in that forgotten place. If I wanted to be free, I would have to return. The idea filled me with dread, but the alternative was worse. I couldn't live like this, haunted by whispers and shadows, knowing that the heart's influence could spread further. I turned the car around, the forest seeming to close in as I retraced my route. The road was eerily silent, the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. The closer I got to the church, the louder the hum grew, resonating through the trees like a heartbeat. When I reached the clearing, the sight of the church sent a wave of nausea through me. Its dark silhouette loomed against the night sky, unchanged and unyielding. The door was slightly ajar, as though it had been waiting for me. I stepped out of the car, my legs weak beneath me. The whispers returned as I approached the entrance, faint and mocking. You cannot escape it. The heart sees you. Welcome back. I hesitated at the threshold, my flashlight flickering weakly in my hand. The air inside was colder than I remembered, a metallic tang stronger. The carvings on the walls glowed faintly, their light pulsating in rhythm with a hum that filled the space. The pedestal at the center of the room was still there, its surface dark and lifeless. The orb was gone, but its presence lingered, an oppressive weight that pressed against my chest. The shadows in the room shifted subtly, their forms flickering at the edges of my vision. I stepped closer to the pedestal, my breathing shallow. The carvings on its surface were more intricate than I had realized, forming patterns that seemed to spiral inward, drawing my gaze toward the center. The whispers grew louder, their tone insistent. The heart is eternal. The bridge must remain. You cannot break it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the notebook I had taken with me on my first visit. Its pages were filled with sketches and notes about the carvings, the symbols I had seen both inside and outside the church. As I flipped through them, a realization struck me. The symbols weren't just markings, they were part of a ritual. The notebook contained fragments of instructions, pieced together from the ancient text I had found on the lectern. They hinted at a way to sever the heart's connection to this world, but the process was incomplete, the final steps missing. Desperation clawed at me as I tried to make sense of the patterns. The whispers mocked my efforts, their voices rising into a chaotic cacophony. You cannot break the heart. The heart consumes all. You are too late. I ignored the voices, focusing on the fragments of the ritual. The carvings on the pedestal seemed to shift in response, their light pulsating faster as though they were reacting to my thoughts. I realized that the final step wasn't missing. It was here, embedded in the pedestal itself. I placed my hands on the cold stone, the carvings glowing brighter under my touch. The whispers reached a fever pitch, their voices overlapping into a single unified chant. The heart beats. The heart spreads. The heart is eternal. The pedestal trembled beneath my hands, its surface heating as the carving shifted into a new pattern. The room around me seemed to warp, the walls bending inward as though the church itself was collapsing. With every ounce of strength I had, I pressed my hands against the pedestal, willing the ritual to complete. The whispers grew deafening, their voices screaming in protest as the carvings pulsed with a blinding light. The shadows in the room convulsed, their forms disintegrating into wisps of smoke. The hum reached its crescendo, vibrating through my body, and then silence. The carvings dimmed, their light fading into nothingness. The pedestal cracked, splitting down the center with a thunderous crack. The oppressive weight lifted, and the air grew still. I stumbled out of the church, my legs weak, the forest now eerily quiet. The carvings on the trees were gone, their glow extinguished. The hum, the whispers, the presence of the heart, it was all gone. For the first time since I had stumbled upon the deep web thread, I felt truly free. But deep down, I knew the truth. The heart was not destroyed. It was merely dormant, waiting for the next curious soul to awaken it. The forest was deathly quiet as I made my way back to the car, the absence of the hum and whispers unsettling in its own way. The church loomed behind me, now a dark and lifeless shadow, its oppressive energy gone, but its memory seared into my mind. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of what had just happened refused to leave me. When I reached the car, I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The silence was almost suffocating. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, its screen lighting up with a single notification. My heart sank as I picked it up, half expecting another cryptic message from the heart. Instead, it was a notification from the same deep web forum that had led me to this nightmare in the first place. The thread I had found was updated with a new post. The forgotten church is silent. For now. My chest tightened as I opened the thread, scrolling past the older warnings and fragmented experiences. The new post was from an anonymous user, and it felt as though it were directed at me personally. You sever the bridge, but it will rebuild. The heart always finds a way. Be vigilant, Alex. My name. The heart wasn't done with me, even now. My stomach churned as I scrolled further, finding new replies from users who claimed to have seen the church in their dreams or felt its presence in their own lives. The heart's influence hadn't ended. I had only delayed it. I slammed the phone down, anger and fear bubbling inside me. No, I muttered under my breath. It's over. It has to be. I started the car and drove back towards civilization, the night feeling darker than before. The road was empty, the forest stretching endlessly on either side, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every flicker of the trees in my peripheral vision made my pulse race. When I finally reached the city, the sight of streetlights and distant buildings should have been comforting, but they felt foreign, almost wrong. The whispers were gone, but a faint hum lingered at the edge of my hearing, a subtle reminder of the heart's presence. I parked in front of my apartment building and sat there for a moment, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked the same, but my eyes carried the weight of something I couldn't explain. Inside, the quiet of my apartment felt hollow, as though the heart had followed me home. I placed my phone on the table, its dark screen seeming to taunt me. Against my better judgment, I opened the deep web forum again, searching for answers. The thread was still active, new replies pouring in. The heart cannot die. It is silent, but it watches. Those who awaken it are marked forever. The words sent a chill through me. I closed the laptop, trying to push the thoughts from my mind, but they lingered, clinging to me like a shadow. The hum grew louder that night, subtle but inescapable. It wasn't in the air. It was inside me, a vibration that resonated in my bones. I couldn't sleep, the memory of the church replaying in my mind over and over. In the early hours of the morning, I received another message on my phone. It was a video sent from an unknown source. My hands trembled as I opened it, the screen filling with static before resolving into an image of the church. The camera panned slowly through the interior, revealing the pedestal, now cracked and lifeless. But as the video continued, something changed. The carvings on the walls began to glow faintly, their light pulsating in rhythm with a hum in my chest. The whispers returned, faint and fragmented. It remembers. It rebuilds. It waits. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the dark screen. My hands shook as I set the phone down, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The heart wasn't gone. It was waiting, watching, and I was still connected to it. I thought about warning others, posting my experience on the forum to dissuade anyone from seeking the church. But as I opened the thread again, I saw my story already there, detailed, accurate, and written as though it had been documented in real time. The final comment chilled me to the core. The heart beats for you, Alex. It always will. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark, my thoughts racing. The heart was more than a relic, more than a place. It was a force, ancient and incomprehensible, and I had become part of its story. The whispers faded again, leaving only the faint hum. I didn't know how long it would stay silent or what would happen when it woke once more. But one thing was certain, the heart never forgets. And neither would I.